Namaste friends, I am Rohan Deshpande.
And I am Dr. Neha Tod.
We welcome you all to our new episode of our Raashtra Sevak YouTube channel. Friends, have you ever seen a flower of marigold? It is very common in our rituals and all the religious practices. The peculiar characteristic of this flower is that it is not a single flower, but it is a bunch of tiny flower petals. Upon careful examination, we come to know that it is very complex, but it is equally beautiful too. Similarly, today we are bringing you a topic from the ancient literature which is prima facie very complicated to the normal humans, but it's in itself a very beautiful topic. It is none other than our Upanishad. To enlighten us on this topic, let's welcome Dr. Sucheta Paranjape. Welcome, Doctor. Dr. Paranjape, when it comes to religious texts, we have heard about Upanishads, Vedas, Bhagavad Gita, and a lot many other things. But to the common man, it is only related and only limited to the knowing of these names. We hardly know about its context, about its significance, about its origin, and every other things. So, could you enlighten us what exactly are Upanishads?
Certainly, that's why I am here, in fact. What you say is very true. Many people, in fact, mostly the younger generation, is not aware of our great heritage. It is not only literary heritage, but even philosophical and spiritual heritage. And for that, I have come here. And today we are going to focus only on Upanishads, right? So, what are Upanishads? Can you tell me the names of at least a couple of them? So, let's say, all of you think about it. Do I know the name of at least one Upanishad? And I think, I'm sorry to say this, but 80% of you will say, sorry, but we don't know the names, right? There are many Upanishads, and let's see what the word Upanishad means. Upa is near, okay? Ni is down or below, and Sada is to sit. Now, in those days, as you know very well, it was a Guru Shishya Parampara, which was also called Maukhika Parampara, that is oral tradition. So the teacher will sit on a platform and the students will sit below, Upa but Ni, and they will sit Sada, so that the teacher can look at all the students. I would rather use the word Guru and Shishya instead of teacher and students. And the Shishyas can also look at the Guru. So, when Guru imparted knowledge through this system of teaching, it was called Upanishad. Upanishad. Okay? And now, the thing is, the word Upanishad later on came to mean esoteric knowledge. Now, what is esoteric knowledge? In Sanskrit, you will probably understand it better. It is Rahasya Jnana. Okay? Rahasya is secret. Secret not in the sense of some good thing, but about philosophy, about spiritualism, and that is why Upanishad later on came to mean Jnana. In fact, many Upanishads, the Shishyas say to the Guru, Upanishadam me bruhi bho iti. That is, please teach us the Upanishad. By Upanishad, they don't mean the text. What they mean is the knowledge. Okay, but later on, text and knowledge, they become synonymous, and then there is absolutely no difference. This is the literal meaning of the word Upanishad, and it is explained, I must tell you, that it is explained very well by Adi Shankaracharya. I will be taking his name with great pride and honor, because it is because of him that Upanishads have survived, and we are fortunate enough to read and study them even today. So, on the commentary, one of the commentaries, it is called Bhashya in Sanskrit. In one of the Bhashyas, Shankaracharya gives this meaning. Okay, so this is the literal meaning of Upanishad. But honestly, you don't know this, or you don't want to know this meaning. What you want to know is about the text. Am I right?
That's right.
Okay, so let me say something more about the text. Just as Veda also means knowledge, and when knowledge was collected and collected into one text, it was called Veda. When there were Ruks collected, it was called Ruk Veda. When Yajus were collected, it was called Yajur Veda. Similarly, when all such philosophical knowledge was collected, it was called Upanishad. Now, how many Upanishads are there? Have you ever thought of that?
We have only heard about 4.
4.
Yes.
Okay, but I'm glad you have heard about 4, and that's the beginning, I would say. So, Upanishad as a text are many. Right now, I would just use this word many. But there is one Upanishad which is called Mauktika Upanishad. Mauktika Upanishad. Okay? And in that Upanishad comes a list of Dasha Mukhya Upanishads. The meaning is very clear. 10 principal Upanishads. Which are they? They are Isha. Now please remember the names. At least try to remember the names. Isha, Kena, Katha, Prashna, Mundaka, Mandukya, Aitareya, Taittiriya, Chandogya and Bruhadaranyaka. Okay? These names are not difficult at all. I mean, we remember even the chemical names of metals and all, so we can easily remember these names, and they are directly connected to our heritage. So we should remember that. Why are these 10 Mukhya Upanishads and why not the others? It is not that other Upanishads are not good. They definitely are. But these are the Upanishads on which Adi Shankaracharya has written a bhashya, a commentary. And therefore, they have a certain level of authenticity, a certain level of quality, and so we call them Mukhya Upanishad.
So doctor, you mentioned about the key 10 Upanishads that are there. So we have heard approximately 110 or 108 Upanishads are present. So what is the significance of these Upanishads, if you can highlight us with it?
Oh, definitely. See, what happened later on is that the word Upanishad became very significant. I mean, if I write something and I label it as Upanishad, then it is always better because it will have that authenticity. There are many other Upanishads, like I told you about Narayaniya Upanishad or other Upanishads, which are philosophical, but later on, when people wrote and collected some knowledgeable things, they labeled it as Upanishads. So much so that all these Upanishads I would call a-religious. They have nothing to do with religion per se. They have the Mukhya Upanishads. They are dealing with philosophy and spiritualism. But later on, the Upanishads which came were mainly religious and mythological. In the sense, there were Shakta. Shakta Upanishads which deal with Shakti. Then Vaishnava, you can imagine Vishnu, Shaiva, Ganapatya. There were so many cults which we call Sampradaya. So there were so many cults that Upanishads were written in that. I mean, something was written about that deity and it was labeled as Upanishad. Okay, so the number of Upanishads kept on rising, but please remember that the core of such Upanishads is not the same as the 10 principal Upanishads. I must tell you some very nice things, interesting things rather. There are some Upanishads. One of them is called Rasopanishad. Rasa, you know what is Rasa? Rasa is mercury. Okay, that's why we get the word Rasayana Shastra for chemistry. So anyway, somebody thought of this mercury. You know, all the scientists believe that mercury can produce gold from, and therefore chemistry was developed. So Rasopanishad tells you about ways of changing a metal into gold by using mercury. This never was successful experiment, but it tells you that. Then there is one Garbhopanishad. Garbha, as we all know, is embryo, and there they have tried to give you the development of the embryo when it is still in the mother's womb. So just imagine, the approach is scientific, but they call it Upanishad for the simplest reason that it is knowledge. Okay? Even this is okay because this is in our tradition and we can still call it Upanishad. If I tell you that there is one Khandoba Upanishad, will you believe that? Khandoba, which is a deity, local deity at Jesuri here, and it's a deity of shepherds. Even for him, people have composed Khandoba Upanishad. Khandoba Upanishad. Now you will realize how the term Upanishad grew beyond proportion. Right? But the most important thing, and I like it a lot, is I told you in the beginning that the 10 Upanishads are irreligious. And here we have an Upanishad which is called Allopanishad. Can you believe? Islam has written, some people from Islam have written an Upanishad. Because they thought that this is a good terminology, they wrote an Upanishad and it is called Allopanishad. So why should Christians lag behind? And you know that the first sermon which Jesus Christ gave is called Sermon on the Mountain. That is translated into Sanskrit and it is called Shaila Upanishad. Shaila is a mountain. So just imagine that even other religions were attracted to the term Upanishads and the kind of form and philosophy the Upanishads had. These Upanishads have absolutely nothing in common with our 10 principal Upanishad, Mukhya Upanishad, but they are still called Upanishads. And now you ask me that there are 108 Upanishads. There are more than 200 Upanishads, but we do not consider them as Upanishads. By Upanishads, when people think of Upanishads, we only think of what is labeled as Vedanta and what is a part of Vedic Sahitya. This Allopanishad, Garbhopanishad obviously is not Vedic, so we don't consider that.
So, based on what you have mentioned just now, we can relate how this topic, how this term of Upanishads has a vast application across many areas. And that reminds me of one thing, speaking of which it comes to Rasa Upanishad, like you mentioned about mercury. Yes. Now, mercury is termed as a dangerous metal which is not supposed to be handled by bare hands by common man. But I remember in Hinduism, people used to and people still make idols made out of refined mercury. Even some medicines since ancient times consider mercury as a vital element. So that shows that it is a very potent knowledge and it has a very wide application. Just that it has been proved scientifically now, but it has been into existence since time immemorial.
I'm just talking about philosophy and spiritualism, but you would be surprised to know the extent of knowledge of sciences right from Rigveda. Astronomy, mathematics, metallurgy, you just cannot believe. But you are very right that it also shows us. But like I said, these are post-Vedanta Upanishads. So we don't consider them
as we speak. It has already excited me a lot because when we started this topic of Upanishads, I had a brief idea in mind about religion and Hinduism, a typical mind frame which anybody has. But as we have continued in this journey, it has already shown its significance and its relevance in science and metallurgy. Yes, so this itself shows how good and how deep this topic is all about.
Oh yes, it is. And that is why, apart from philosophy and apart from spiritualism, there is a lot more, not only in Upanishads, but the entire Vedic literature. By the way, spiritualism is something nowadays everybody practices a little bit. Everybody, in the sense, people like you all, right? What is philosophy? Can you define? If not define, can you say something about it?
In layman terms, I would say Tattvajnan.
Tattvajnan is a translation.
It is some
Okay.
school of thought that you believe in.
Okay, some school of thought. Okay. When I wanted to do my PhD, I went to my advisor and I asked him, why am I going to be called Doctor of Philosophy? I'm not doing my doctorate in philosophy, I'm doing my doctorate in Sanskrit. So I should be called Doctor of Sanskrit. And he told me something which is relevant for everybody to understand. He said it is not whether you do your doctorate in geography or maths or Sanskrit or computer science, doesn't matter. What matters is the meaning of the word philosophy. Philo is love and Sophia is the goddess of knowledge. We have Sophia College, we know that. So philosophy literally means love for knowledge. Okay? And therefore, whichever the subject, it will always be philosophy. Okay? And therefore, whatever happens, you will still have philosophy, whether it is rasa or para or mercury or anything, it is always philosophy.
So, just as you said, philosophy means the love for knowledge.
Right.
So, what exactly is the core philosophy of Upanishad?
Okay. And now I'm going to use the word philosophy in the sense of the common man's understanding, like you said, Tattvajnana, and also a little bit of spiritualism. But before that, if you don't mind, I would like to tell you something more about the background of Upanishadic period. When and how Upanishads were composed. That becomes, that will help you understand the Upanishadic philosophy a lot better. The thing is, before Upanishads, there were texts called, Vedas, Samhita as we call them, Brahmana. This Brahmana is name of a text. It has nothing to do with any caste. Please remember that. And Aranyaka. Okay. During Brahmana period, Karma Kanda reached its climax. What is Karma Kanda? Performing yajna. We know that, right? For each and everything, the solution was yajna. So, if you want rain, perform Kariri Ishti. If you want Putra, a son, Putra Kameshti Yajna. We have heard about Putra Kameshti Yajna which Dasharatha performed. If you want good food and beverage, then perform Vajopeya. Vajo is food, Peya as you know is drinks, and people who perform Vajopeya are called Vajopeyi. Okay, so just remember how our culture has percolated even in the names that we, just as I always say that there are Dvivedis, Trivedis, Chaturvedis, which mean they knew all the three Vedas, all the four Vedas and things like that. Anyway, so this is how the Karma Kanda was a bit too much. Okay, and therefore they decided that this really work? Does performing an Agnishtoma Yajna really gives you heaven after death? Who knows? Right? Because the body is offered in the fire, so who knows whether what happens in the post-death life. So they started thinking. So just imagine, in Brahmana period, it is still Yajna as Karma Kanda. In Aranyaka times, what is Aranya? Aranya is a forest. So these people, they went to forest in the sense they wanted to go away from the chaos of the Yajna, and there they started thinking about Yajna. So the subject is still Yajna, but it is no more Karma Kanda, it is Jnana Kanda. They are looking at it academically, they are looking at it philosophically. Okay, so just see the gradual growth. Things don't happen overnight. It is an evolution. It is a social evolution, it is spiritual evolution, and it is philosophical evolution too. It must have taken maybe 2 centuries, doesn't matter. But the society ultimately reached Jnana Kanda about Yajna, and from there they realized that it is not only Yajna which is important. It is the body which is burned, but something else happens. And what is that? The Atman. That gets freed from the body when you burn your body, right? That is after death. So this is how they started thinking of knowledge about whatever they thought of. So now Yajna is not in view at all, and they are insisting and promoting on mainly Jnana Kanda. Okay? Now when it was Yajna, for everything there was Yajna, right? So it was mainly a male dominated society, because men would perform Yajna, men would be praised, men would be this and that. Yajamana Patni used to be there, but just to say Mama, that touch the hand, Hatala Hat Lava, and say Mama, that's all they knew. But now, in Upanishadic times, even women have become aware. Even they have started talking about knowledge. I don't want to say the word knowledge, I want to use the word jnana. Who are these women? You probably know. Words, names like Gargi, Maitreyi, right? They come from Upanishads. In Brahmana period and even in Aranyaka, people who thought and performed those yajnas were all adults, obviously. After their Upanayana and everything, and then they finish their education and they perform yajna. But in Upanishadic times, even small kids, I don't even want to say children, they are small kids who have started thinking on philosophical lines. You will not believe. There is one Upanishad called Katha Upanishad. You must have heard. Katha Upanishad. And in this Katha Upanishad, who asks the questions to the god of death, Yama. He is a 8-year-old boy whose name is Nachiketa. Even today, parents proudly name their child as Nachiketa, but they don't know who Nachiketa was. And Nachiketa is I don't want to say hero, but he is the main character and main philosopher in Katha Upanishad. There is Satyakama Jabala from Chandogya Upanishad. He is also a young boy. And there are so many examples I can give you, But see, now knowledge is not the monopoly of only men. Knowledge is not the monopoly of only adults. It is percolating to all the strata of the society, which is very important, right? And then, most importantly, this is an objection which people love to take against us. That, it was limited only to a handful of people, who belong to a particular caste. Why a particular? I would say it openly, who belong to Brahmin caste. So probably this was true. Actually, even in Rigveda, there are suktas, poems, which are composed by non-Brahmins, but nobody knows that. They are composed by women. We are not aware of it. But yajna the priests used to be obviously Brahmins. Not so in Upanishads. In fact, the most important principles of philosophy, which we use even today in our day-to-day life, they all come from Kshatriyas. And so many times there are stories, where a Kshatriya king comes to Brahmin and says, please teach me Brahman. I will talk about the core philosophy later, but please teach me Brahman. And the Brahmin tries to say something to him, and the Kshatriya king says, no, this is not right. I will teach you what is Brahman. So just imagine, the position has changed. The Kshatriyas have become the gurus. That is because in those days the society was not divided into watertight compartments. Okay, it was an open society and people could do everything. So from adults to children, from men to women, from Brahmins to other castes. There is one great philosopher called Raikva who teaches Samvarga Vidya, forget about the philosophy, but Samvarga Vidya to a great king called Jana Shruti Pautrayana. And who is Raikva? Raikva is a Shudra. He is a Shudra, he has some skin disease, he is scratching it. Outwardly the picture is so repulsive, but his knowledge is so amazing. And that is why you find the shift of everything from Brahmana Aranyaka to Upanishads, and that is how Upanishads came into being. Okay, when they thought of that. So, I forget your question. What did you ask me? What was
The topic was, like you said, philosophy is the love for knowledge. So basically, what is the actual core philosophy of Upanishads?
Okay. The core philosophy of Upanishads can be written. By the way, there are 10 Upanishads. We are going to talk only about 10 Upanishads. Sure. Out of them, there are some which are written in verse form, like Ishakena, etc., or Katha. And there are some which are written in both prose and verse. Okay? Those which are written in verse form are small. In fact, very small. Sometimes one Upanishad contains only 12 verses. So just imagine. Anyway, so these Upanishads have philosophy which is solidified in them. Every verse will tell you a lot more. Now, what do they say? These Upanishads, the smaller ones, mainly tell you how yajnas are not useful for you to take you from this world to the world beyond. They tell you that yajnas are like nauka, they say. Plavayete adrudha yajna rupa. Adrudha, these yajna boats, naukas, they are not strong enough. They have some hole at the bottom and therefore they will sink you anytime. So get out of that and start doing knowledge, jnana kanda. Okay, so this is a basic thing where the shift from karma kanda to jnana kanda. And now there are three main philosophies which I must tell you. Philosophical concepts, I would say. One is karma, the other is punarjanma, and the third is Advaita. You must have heard the word Advaita. Even today, boys are named Advaita. Like I said, I feel sorry they don't know the name, what great significance their names have. But anyway, so this karma and punarjanma, as we know, especially the karma siddhanta, again comes from a king, not from a guru who is a Brahmin man by caste, okay? So just imagine, in one of the Upanishads, Gargi, when she is talking to Yajnavalkya, she says, who is a Brahmana? And Yajnavalkya tells her, the one who knows Brahman is called Brahmana. Doesn't matter to who his parents are, doesn't matter what his lineage is. It is, if he knows, then he is a Brahmana. So, what is karma? Now, Hindu philosophy, I think Rohan also wanted to know about how relevant Upanishadic philosophy is today, right? Just see, I will explain something, then you would realize that, oh my God, unknowingly I have been following Upanishadic philosophy all my life. What is karma? We all know what is karma. Please do not translate this as action or deed or anything of this sort. Karma is karma. And now, as you know, even Oxford Dictionary has the word karma, though they call it karma, but we know it is karma. And this karma is what you do in this birth. which will take you to the next birth, if you have a next birth. In the sense, if you are a great Siddha and you have moksha, then you are emancipated completely. That doesn't happen to people like you and me. So let us assume that we are going to have Punarjanma. Now just see how all the concepts are intermingled. So if you accept Karma Siddhanta, that I am doing good deeds, therefore I will get a good birth next time, in the next life, then you are already accepting Punarjanma, right? Because unless you accept Punarjanma, you cannot, what is the point of accepting Karma? So these two things are so closely related that you just cannot separate them. I don't even like to say two sides of the same coin. No, they are away from each other and they don't face each other. But here, Karma and Punarjanma are intertwined into each other. Okay? And that we know. I mean, people keep talking a lot about Karma Siddhanta, that how it is like your bank balance. If you have good money, then you will. It is like that. It is not bank balance, it is much more than that. So, Karma is very important. This also, Karma, is not only a philosophical concept. It is also a moral teaching that you do good things, otherwise you will be punished in your next birth. Now we are doing this in English, but I'll give you a couple of examples from Marathi, because that's how, according to me, your language defines your culture and philosophy. If something good happens, then, not good, but if something bad happens, then we say, Bhog apल्या कर्माची फळं. Don't we say that? You know what all you are accepting when you say this simple sentence, that there is Karma Siddhanta, there is Punarjanma Siddhanta, or if I lose something, maybe somebody takes away my gold or something, I would say, मागच्या जन्मीचं देणं होतं. Right? So, all this philosophy, I don't even want to say it runs in your blood, it runs in your DNA. You know what I mean? You cannot separate it away from you. So, Karma and Punarjanma are two important things, and that, there are so many examples. Now, you think of one example in your own language where you find that Karma and Punarjanma Siddhanta are accepted by you. And now let me come to Advaita. Okay, that's a wonderful philosophy. Dvaita is, to give you the philosophical jargon, dichotomy, which means nothing. It is two separate entities. That is Dvaita. Okay, and Advaita, not two separate entities, they are one and the same. Okay, now which are these two? That is the most important thing. Like I told you, Karma is on ethical and moral level. Punarjanma is on some other level, that is life after death and all those things. Whereas Advaita Tattva Jnana is entirely on spiritual level. Right? So the theory is, there is an Atman in us. Every living being has Atman. Now what is Atman? We all are aware that my hand is not me, my hair is not me, legs are not me. There is something more than that. Because when I die, everything remains, right? Till the funeral rites are done. And still there is something which has left the body, and that is called Atman. Then some may call it Prana, some may call it Jiva, or whatever, the names don't matter. We will call it Atman because Upanishads call it Atman. Okay? Atman, by the way, is a concept which is being very popular now, and it is used all over the world in its philosophy. In fact, in German, there is a verb, Atman, and which means to breathe. So just imagine how both languages, both cultures, both philosophies, they run parallel to each other. So anyway, this is Atman. And once you accept that, and you have to, otherwise what is the difference between body, a body which is alive and body which is dead? The only difference is eka shwasacha antar. Okay, so that is important. And then somebody says, so what happens to this Atman? When the Atman leaves the body, what happens to it? Does it disappear? Or does it end? No. Atman cannot disappear. Atman cannot end. Atman cannot be defined. Atman is neither small nor big nor wet nor dry. It goes and enters Brahman. Now this is Atman, which is individual, Atman, soul, and this is Brahman, which is more than universal, In today's parlance, I can say microcosm and macrocosm. So Atman is micro and Brahman is macro, and they are one and the same.
Dr. Paranjape, sorry to interrupt you.
No.
But speaking of this Atman, which you just now mentioned, its form, I remember something from my school days, which we had been taught in Science 1 lecture, like energy is something which neither can be created nor can be destroyed. So can we say that Atman is also a similar thing?
In fact, you are very right, because there is no time to explain everything, but now that you are using these words, let me say that later on the Sankhya philosophy calls this matter and energy. Body is matter, we know, and Atman is, or prana is energy. You are very right. So it is exactly the energy that we are talking about. The only thing is, in Upanishads, all this philosophy was not offered to you in the garb of science. That's about it. But what they say has a lot of scientific basis. Why do you think for thousands of years Upanishads are still read? Why do you think they are still practiced? And like I said, even in our culture, they are percolated. Because they are true. That is the reality. And in fact, the ultimate reality is Brahman. That is the ultimate reality. So this is Advaita Siddhanta. And this has been explained so beautifully, mostly in Chandogya Upanishad and Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. I am going to request all of you. I know that it is impossible, physically impossible for anyone to read all the Upanishads at this age, right? So what you can do is read some translations and select some translations. That is easier to read about Yajnavalkya Maitreyi Samvad, Yajnavalkya Gargi Samvad. Read that and you would know exactly what I mean.
So, like we are talking about knowledge, how we say that the knowledge develops usually from experience, experiment, or it is being passed from one generation to another. And like we are talking about different theories of Upanishad, and like this current generation, we always ask about some logical reasoning behind it, that why are you saying, or from where has this come up. So if you can tell us that how these Upanishads were written.
Thank you for asking this question. You know something, I have always believed that Upanishads tell you philosophy. Not just, there is an Atman, it goes into Brahman, never of that sort. It is not an essay, okay? It teaches you. First of all, there is always, as we saw in the beginning, Guru Shishya Maukhika Parampara. So when there is conversation, Shishyas will ask questions, Gurus will explain. So the language is simple, right? The language has to be simple because I am not writing an essay, I am talking to you. Secondly, you ask me a very pertinent question. We want to know why and how. How can I prove that there is Atman? Okay, I just mentioned this Brihadaranyaka and Yajnavalkya Maitreyi Samvad, or there is also another Samvad, Uddalaka Aruni, We won't go into details, but I'll tell you one thing. This Maitreyi is Yajnavalkya's wife. And she says, you tell me that Atman is everywhere. I can't see it. So I don't want to believe it. Scientific approach, right? I don't want to believe it. Yajnavalkya says, yes, you are right. But why don't you do one thing? Please get me a, not glass, but a clay pot of water with some Saindhava. That which comes from Sindhu, that is ocean, it's Saindhava, which is salt. So she brings that. Saline water, just to give him some energy. So she brings that. He said, please stir it everywhere. Poor lady, she doesn't know what she is going into. Huh? She does that. And then he says, now please taste it from left corner. How is it? She says, salty. From right, salty. From bottom, salty. From everywhere it is salty. Okay, now show me where is the salt. So she says, I can't show you the salt. The salt is dissolved everywhere. I know that modern science will tell you that evaporate the water and you will see the salt. That's not the point. But she is convinced, and he tells her because she is a common housewife. So this is her usual, what we call Bhava Vishwa. This is her usual field, of work. And so she understands. There is one, this is according to me, laboratory of philosophy. I'll show you how it is done. And then he shows her. There is one pair of Guru Shishya, but they are also father and son. Shvetaketu and Uddalakaruni. And this Shvetaketu being young and he just graduated and thinks too much of himself, and the father realizes that I better teach this lad some real knowledge. And he says, okay, sit down and all that. And he talks about Brahma Jnana, how from the smallest of Brahman. In fact, I must tell you this, there is one Shandilya Vidya, in which Shandilya says, how is my Atman? Ano Raniyan Mahato Mahiyan. It is smaller than Anu atom. And Mahato Mahiyan, whatever you think of as the biggest one, infinity, it is even bigger than that. And he gives examples. It is smaller than rice grain, it is smaller than flaxseed and all those things.
Like you say, Anupasuni Brahmanda evada hota
jata se. Similarly, right? So just see this, that he tells him that Brahman was created by that. And Shvetaketu, no young man, who is recently graduated wants to listen to his father. So he said, no, I don't believe you. He said, okay, but now I'm tired, I am hungry. Go there, there is an Udumbara tree, fig tree, but not the fig which we eat, but other big one. So get me an Udumbara. So he brings that. Open it, please. He opens it. What do you see inside? Oh, there are small green, like how in figs we have these small seeds. He said, break that. Take one seed and break it. He breaks it and he says, what is inside? He says, nothing. There is nothing inside. There is nothing which I can describe. There is nothing which has characteristics. There is nothing which has anything. So he said, and how did that huge Udumbara tree was created? Shvetaketu says, oh, somebody must have thrown one such seed, and from that, okay. So you agree to this, that from a small negligible seed, a huge tree can be created. Then why don't you accept that from a small Brahman, this entire universe can be created? You understand? So your question will be answered by, I just gave you a couple of examples, but there are so many examples where the Guru always shows them, not only tells them. There is no theory. There is theory, but it is seconded with the practicals, and that is how the scientific approach also comes.
You gave a very beautiful example of the tree, and which takes me to a similar incident which I would like to quote. Now, you tell me how relevance this has to our current topic. coming to Sir Isaac Newton, when he described the gravitational force sitting below an apple tree, apple fell. That's when he described there is a force existent in nature, which is a gravitation. But I have read somewhere that, okay, you say that apple has fell from the tree on the ground, which is a gravitational force. But do you actually know what made that apple go from the ground to the tree? You're talking about science, you're talking about the gravitational force. But what made that force into existence? There was a seed which was planted. The whole nature came into existence, the soil, the moisture, water, nutrients, etc., everything. It gave all the supply to the seed. It became a sapling, then a plant, then a tree. Then came the flower, then the apple, which fell down on your head. But what actually is supplying to the tree is the philosophy, is the Vedanta, is the Advaita philosophy which you are talking about.
Yeah.
So gravitational force, in this context, if we talk, it is not about something falling from above to the below.
How it
but
went
it's all about how it went above.
So that is creation.
Exactly.
Right? And creation of universe is one thing which has always attracted all people. Whether it was Rigvedic Rishis, Upanishadic Munis like Yajnavalkya and all, or Kanada. You probably know that one of the great Indian philosopher called Kanada was the first person to define an atom, Anu. Or the word Anu comes from Vedic literature. So we have that concept since long, Then whether you are a quantum physicist, a nuclear physicist, Einstein or Stephen Hawking, they all are there to solve the mystery of creation of the universe. So this exactly explains how it is, and therefore I would say that Upanishadic philosophy, forget about the laboratory and practical advice. It always comes through stories. Do you know that? There are stories that once upon a time there was a great king named Janaka, and in his court there was a great philosopher called Yajnavalkya. And one day, you know what happened? Many other philosophers came, and you are carried away into that story. Otherwise, you would never read that philosophy. And this is also what we call pedagogical style, that you attract people just by telling stories, by giving practicals or telling parallel examples, telling examples from history. You probably, Neha, asked me whether there are any, how was it transmitted from one to other. You will be surprised, in every Upanishad there is something called Vidya Vamsha. Vamsha, I mean, the family tree or family lineage, whatever you want to say. Like today we have the Paranjape Kula Vruttanta, where all the Paranjapes will be enlisted. Here you have the lineage of Vidya. That, I am a student of Dr. R.N. Dandekar. Dr. R.N. Dandekar was a student of H.D. Velankar. I mean, this kind of, it not only teaches you more about your academic lineage, but it also teaches you about the history, that who were the history teachers in the past and how it was handed down. This Vidya Vamsha is more important to Upanishadic people than their biological birth and that lineage.
So doctor, like you mentioned about certain characters in the Upanishads like Gargi and Maitreyi. So are there any other characters, and what is their significance mentioned in the scripts?
There definitely are many other characters, because somebody composed Upanishads, right? So their names will come, their background will come. I would mention, just now I think I mentioned Shandilya, who gave this Shandilya Vidya, Anoraniyan, etc. Janashruti Pautrayana, Raikva. But in Brihadaranyaka, or even Shvetaketu Aruni, I mentioned that also. In Brihadaranyaka, It is entirely a story, it begins with a story form. Janakaho Vaideha, म्हणजे Janakoha Vaideha, that is King Janaka of Videha. Now I purposely said this because just see how this connects you to Ramayana, right? And then there is also example, not this Upanishad, but somebody tells Brahma Vidya to Devaki Putra Krishna Vasudeva. So just imagine how all these things come on the same plane at one time. So there are many characters, but Janaka Vaideha was a great philosopher, not only a great king. See, there are many philosophers mentioned in Janaka's court, like Kahoda, Shakalya, Ushasti, Chakrayana, and all that. But why did they flock here to Janaka's court? Because Janaka took care of them. Even a philosopher does need to cook his rice and eat, right? Janaka took care of that. Yajnavalkya was the principal philosopher in his court. Just as we say poet laureate, he was the philosopher laureate in Janaka's court. Yajnavalkya had 2 wives. I'll tell you this story because it's interesting. Which is surprising because generally kings used to have polygamy. But here, even Yajnavalkya has 2 wives, Katyayani and Maitreyi. When Yajnavalkya decided that I will now take sannyasa, he said, okay, I will divide everything amongst the 2 of you. Katyayani was a simple woman. She said, okay, whatever you give me, I am happy about. Maitreyi says, if you give me this entire earth full of gold and diamonds, they used to wear diamonds also, or whatever other wealth you have, will I have the knowledge of Atman by that? So see her priorities. And Yajnavalkya says, I will quote this from Brihadaranyaka, Sanskrit, such a flow of wonderful language. He says, Yathavai upakaranavatam jivitam syat, upakaranavatam jivitam syat, tathaivate jivitam bhavati, amrutatvasya tu na ashasti vittenam. Your life with so much wealth will only be like those who have upakaranam. There are means of happiness that you can, whatever you can buy. There are 10 houses, there are 7 mobiles, a Jaguar and BMW and whatnot, a farmhouse. Does that guarantee happiness? Does that guarantee any knowledge? No. In fact, he says, if you are wealthy, this philosophy somehow I like. Amrutatvasya tu, Amrutatva is Atmadhyana. Na ashasti vittena. If you are after money, you will never have this Atmadhyana. And then she says, then I don't want anything. Just tell me what Atmadhyana is. And he tells her Atmadhyana. Okay, so just see how women also, I told you, women also started saying this. The same is the case with Gargi, again in connection of Yajnavalkya. In Janaka's court, one day Janaka says, okay, who is the best philosopher? He can take away all these 1,000 cows. And these 1,000 cows with gold studded horns and all, lot of money. Nobody says anything. Yajnavalkya says to one of his students, hey Saumya, O Shishya, take them to our ashram. Then everybody gets agitated. They say, why? We are also good. He said, ask me questions. And everybody asks questions and Yajnavalkya wins because he is the best. There is a female philosopher in Janaka's court. Her name is Gargi Vachaknavi. Vachaknavi is orator. The one who can speak well is called Vachaknavi. Gargi Vachaknavi gets up. Now imagine 2,000-3,000 of years ago in a court there is one woman who has the courage to stand and ask questions to the philosopher laureate. And she asked some questions about Kasminnu khalu idam sarvam otam cha protam cha. Ota prota, we use this word even today, that is in what it is contained. Anyway, Yajnavalkya gives her examples. Then she asks about Brahman, and he says, Ma ati prakshihi. Don't ask too many questions. If you ask too many questions, your head will fall down. A metaphorical way of saying that, keep quiet now. Poor Gargi, she keeps quiet and goes home. Yajnavalkya, according to me, has insulted her enough. She shouldn't have come back, but she has the courage, and I really admire her. Even a woman in 2021, I doubt whether she will have this courage. After 2 days, she comes back and she says, with the permission of all of you, I have come here like a brave soldier who has only 2 arrows with him in his quiver. I have only 2 questions. Let me ask them to Yajnavalkya. And her courage and confidence and conviction, Janaka says, go ahead. And she asks 2 questions about Brahman again. Yajnavalkya has to answer them. And while answering those questions, you will be surprised. She talks and he also answers in terms of time and space. First they talk about Nimisha, Kshana, Ardhamatra. I mean, these are all the old dimensions of counting time, and goes right up to Ahoratra, Samvatsara, etc. for Brahman. And then she also talks about earth, mountain, sky, which is physical space. So did you ever imagine that in Upanishads we have the philosophy which Stephen Hawking tells you about space-time linearship? Can you believe that? And it comes in the conversation of Gargi and Yajnavalkya. So these, I don't even want to call them characters. They are, oh my God, they are something beyond that. And that is why, even today, we know names of Gargi and Maitreyi. Actually, I doubt how many of you know the names of Yajnavalkya for that matter. But Gargi and Maitreyi everybody knows, right? So there are many such characters. I mean, since you use that word, I would say.
In the first place, I am really glad to know that Gargi was first present in the court to speak about it. And after so many years, the position of the women is so deteriorated that they were exempted from even learning the scriptures. So, how...
I will just tell you my favorite thing. That if anybody gives me a time machine, instead of going into 2090 or something, I would go back to Vedic times. You know, but we will talk more about that in some other session. But yes, you are right. The women have, just imagine who will have the courage. Will you have? Think, don't even answer because it's embarrassing to say no, ma'am. So there are many characters, and which adds spice to the Upanishadic philosophy because the story sticks with you, right? When I watch the biopic on Stephen Hawking, he is one of my favorite scientists. You can imagine. I certainly remembered when I was seeing that this is precisely what my Gargi said in Ubrodaranyaka. But why doesn't the world know this? You know why? There is a famous story that people say Columbus was not the first one to discover America. He was the first one to hold a press conference. And which is very important, it is our duty to hold such conferences, sessions, and take our heritage and knowledge to everybody outside, or in fact even inside. Even in India, very few people would know that. So
doctor, I would like to ask you that how these Upanishads have influenced Hinduism so greatly.
Okay, Just now I told you that some siddhantas, Tattvajnana Siddhanta like karma and punarjanma, we use them left, right and center, right? Without realizing that they come from Upanishads, right? We say Om these days. We do dhyana. Please don't use the word meditation. Me meditation karte is such a wrong statement, you know. You should say I perform dhyana. Okay? All these things, they come from Upanishad. One Upanishad or the other. And all these 10 Upanishads, you know, I mean, even if we focus only on these 10 Upanishads, it is not that all the Upanishads say the same thing. One would say something else, the other would say something else. Sometimes you may find that, oh, this is quite different from what Mundaka said. Okay, doesn't matter. So all these things, we still practice. And you will be surprised. Okay, people don't read Upanishads. I don't blame them. But people know Gita. And right from childhood, we tell our children to learn Gita by heart, to memorize Gita. What is Gita? Sarvopanishado gavo dogdha gopalanandana. All the Upanishads are cows, and the cow, the milkman is Krishna. He was Gopala, you know. And what he milked the Upanishads from is contained in Gita. So Gita gives you the essence of the 10 Upanishads. So even that is still going on, right? Upanishadic philosophy, we all carry it forward with us. My only statement will be, we are not aware that it comes from Upanishads, but we still follow it. You will agree. Like I said, even the names, Gargi and Maitreyi, we still have girls named Gargi and Maitreyi and Nachiketa, Satyakama. We have all this.
Like you said, it is already tightly interwoven in our DNA, just that
Really?
we are not aware of
Really,
it.
we are not aware of it. And when you become aware, you become proud of your heritage. And the moment you become proud of your heritage, you can tell the entire world how great and amazing it is. I like our tourism, I think, department. They have said, incredible India. Remember? It's really so, you know. It is incredible. If I tell people that 3000 years ago somebody said something about time, space and Brahman, nobody is going to believe me. But come to the library, I'll give you and show you all the references. Nothing is without any proof. I can give you references for each and everything that I have said just now.
Dr. Paranjape, we very beautifully learned how this Upanishad have been in existence since time immemorial, but I would specifically like to know how this has any relevance in current day-to-day life, what all people can do to get benefits from this in this current global scenario where everything has been so hectic, so stressful. Literally, if we see from one angle, everything is meaningless, everything is more kind of materialistic. What would you say in this context?
Before that, I would mention only one point.
Sure.
That is, Upanishads are called Vedanta. Now you know the word Veda Anta. So it marks the end of Vedic literature. Okay? Anta is end. But Anta also means aim, the goal. Okay? And so what is the goal of learning all the Vedas or Brahmanas, Aranyakas, etc.? It is to reach the level of Upanishadic philosophy. Okay? In that sense, Upanishads are Vedanta. In fact, I always say that going from Vedas to Vedanta is a journey from ritual to spiritual. Get it? So it is such a beautiful journey, and I showed you how gradually the whole thing has happened. Now once you say it is Vedanta, I think what you actually wanted to ask me was, is our later religion, Dharma, Hindu Dharma also has some principles of Upanishads? It definitely has. So after Upanishads, whatever came is not called Vedas at all. Okay, it is post-Vedic, Vedottara. Whether it be Ramayana, Mahabharata, Puranas or whatever. And there you will always see philosophy or stories, anecdotes which are taken directly from Upanishads and put into a different garb. Because by Puranas, the entire attitude had changed completely. In Vedas, like I told you, just try to imagine all this, Vedas have done it so well. They are on a spiritual level. And whereas later religion or later is more on mythological level. Right? We want to do some fasting, then offer red flower to Ganesha. Who says so? The Puranas say so. Upanishads don't say. They are only thinking of knowledge for them. That is the most important thing. So anyway, we have taken a lot of things from Upanishad but presented them in a different form. And that is where the difference lies. You also asked me that today, you mentioned that today's life has become hectic. And again I come back to my ideal, whatever you call it, Adi Shankaracharya. He gave us the philosophy of Maya, illusion. That this entire world is illusion. Right? It is not true. Not true in the sense that in today's world, what do you call it? Virtual reality. Right? It is virtual reality. You know the way Shankaracharya describes this reality? He says, Darpana Purushavat. This reality is like looking at your image in a darpana, that is mirror. Is that image correct, true? In a sense, yes. If I raise my right hand, even that will do that. If I scratch my face, it will do that. But is that real? No, it is Maya. And so the moment you realize that it is Maya, I am not saying that you should not work, you should not study, no. You must do all this, but to a certain level. You must know when enough is enough. And then stop at that. And then if you learn that, like Gita ultimately tells you karma sannyasa. Karma sannyasa doesn't mean I am not going to do anything. It is karma phala sannyasa. That you do your work, but don't expect the fruit. The reward will be there. The fruit will be there. But don't do it with that expectation. This is the crux of Gita and this is the crux of Hinduism. And I would still say that in spite of that, please read more about Upanishads. Okay, right now you can't read Upanishads. Read more about Upanishads. Go into the philosophy, delve into that, dive into that, and you would realize how beautiful the whole thing is. All the best for your ventures and thank you very much.
So thank you so much, Doctor, for introducing us to Upanishads, which is such a huge ocean of knowledge, and I'm sure that our viewers are now motivated to deep dive in it and to know more, and I hope that they'll read more, and if we have any queries, we'll definitely come back to you. So friends, thank you so much for joining us on this introductory course for the Upanishads that Doctor has explained us thoroughly, and we have understood the foundation on which these Upanishads are based, and I'm sure that it will help me and you to go on this path of learning more about Upanishads.
If you like this video, do let us know in the comment section below. Till then, stay tuned to our YouTube channel Raashtra Sevak. Thank you.